Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. I don't immediately break everything. All right. I was going to just go ahead and pick up where we were last week because we kind of ended in the middle of a thought. But there are a lot of people in here who weren't here last week. So I'm going to do a little bit of a recap first. We're getting towards the end of this class, which is found in translation. And over the course of the class so far, what we've been doing is introducing and then practicing using these different tools that are going to help us better understand the words and the language that we find in the Bible. So we've finished that process. We've looked at all of the tools now, and now we're just going to continue to practice using them for the rest of our time together. So very briefly, here are the tools. The first four are for what I've called expanding our biblical encyclopedia. And this is a reference to the way that your brain processes language. Your brain does not process language like a dictionary. It doesn't have a brief sentence definition that you can just go pull up for a word. It has an encyclopedic knowledge of every word in every language that you know. So like pages and pages worth of information and different possible meanings and different connotations and things like this. And so naturally, your encyclopedia is not going to match the encyclopedia of someone from thousands of years ago on the other side of the planet. It doesn't even always match your spouse's, right? If you're a married person. And it certainly doesn't match somebody from another culture or another language group. So we're working to try to get those to match more clearly. And our tools for that are first to try to track with the patterns that we find in the Bible itself, the various themes or the way that they are using words in order to shape our understanding of those words. So every time you come to a passage and you want to try to understand it better, it's important to put it in the context of the whole story of the Bible and the more immediate contexts of, where we are right now. Where does this passage come? I referenced a book a couple weeks ago, How Not to Read the Bible. And he's got a lot of little pithy sayings in it. And one of them is, never read a Bible verse. And his point is, always read at least a paragraph. When you pull out a verse, you can pull out a really wrong verse. And my favorite kind of funny example of that is there was this guy who was feeling really down on himself, just was having a rough time, and he thought, well, let me see what the Bible has to say. And he opened up his Bible and he flipped to a random page and he pointed and he looked down and he said, and Judas went out into a field and hanged himself. And he went, oh no. Okay, well, let me try again. And so he flipped again and he pointed to a random verse and he opened his eyes and it said, and Jesus said to him, now you go and do likewise. Right. Never read a Bible verse, right? Now that's obviously an extreme example, but you've probably seen or done yourself, people pull verses out and say, this is what it means, and then you go look at it within the context and you go, I don't think that's what it's talking about. So that's what this first tool is about trying to put whatever we're reading into the broader context of the whole scriptural story. The second tool is to read multiple translations. No translation is perfect because translation is imperfect by nature. There's no way to do a perfect translation. So to combat that, read more than one. And when you do this regularly, you'll start to notice there are certain sections that will jump out at you at going, this is very different from that. And that is a hint to you that you should maybe go and do some more digging on that particular passage. If you want to do more digging on a particular passage, that's where our third tool comes in. There are lots of really helpful tools out there. In this class, we're focusing on Logos Bible Software, which we'll get to in just a minute. And so if you've not seen that before, you'll get a chance to look at it today. It's a lot of things in one, but mostly we're going to be using it as a concordance or a way to look at the original text and how words are used across the whole Bible. And finally, our last tool is to try and to be aware that our culture is really, really different from the cultures that produced and read the Bible originally. And it can be really helpful to try and put yourself into that cultural context, so to speak, and to get a better understanding, which is what our other two tools are really focused on doing. I've said these are for cleaning our encyclopedias, and I've got cleaning in quotes because your encyclopedia is not wrong, it's not dirty, but there are things that you've got going on up here with your English understanding that simply don't apply to Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic, because those are different languages from different times and different places. So, one way you can try to avoid bringing those things is to, first of all, just be aware that you have them. And wherever possible, wherever you know, and whenever you've learned from other sources, just try to set that aside and hear what the actual author had to say. A few weeks ago, to give you all an example of what I'm talking about, we looked at the phrase from Matthew 5:5, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And we talked about how our modern English encyclopedias hear earth and think planet. But almost certainly no one in the original context thought planet, because almost certainly none of them knew what a planet was. So it can be helpful to kind of get that out of your head, at least for a little bit, and try to hear whatever it was they were really saying on the day. And then you can maybe bring that in later, because we are on a planet, right? So it's not wrong to think that, but it's helpful to kind of grow your understanding that way. And the second one I've said here is to be aware of what I've called connotative drift, which is the idea that words, even within one language, will kind of shift and change their meaning over time. And so a good example of this is the word man. A few decades ago, century ago, you could say man and people understood you meant gender neutral humanity. You can't do that in 2024. That's not what people think, right? And so if you're reading an older translation, even a translation from not that long ago, you might see the word man there to mean humans, and you might, without even realize it, think it means male humans, right? So this is something to be aware of and to look out for. Last week, we started trying to use all of these tools together, and we were looking at, very appropriately, Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through, I think, 9. Yeah, 4 through 9. We looked at a lot of it last week, so I'm not going to retread it. Instead, I'm going to pick up with, we were going to look at this phrase right here, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. Because I think this phrase is very interesting. There are 3 words in here that you hear them in English, and you go, yep, I know what that is. Not necessarily the case back in the day. Those are, of course, heart, soul, and might. So we're going to take a look at those in more depth today, and we'll go from there. So on the screen now, this is Logos Bible software. If you've never seen this before, this is free. You can do this at home. You just pull it up. You can even pull it up on your phone right now. And this is, like I said, it's many things. It's multiple translations. It's there's an atlas in it. There's all kinds of really cool tools in it. But we're using it primarily as a concordance, which means I can click on a word and see how that word is used throughout the whole Bible. So if we want to expand our encyclopedias, this is a very good way to do it. All right. Let's go ahead and look at that word heart. So here's the English heart. Here below it is the Hebrew. Below that is the Hebrew transliterated, because I can't, where am I? I can't read this. So this tells me how to say it. It's levav or lebab. Right? And then below that is what's called the lemma, which is the most basic form of the word. In this case, it's the same. It is the most basic form. So let's take a look at that word and see what we're looking at. Up here at the top, I've got some basic definitions. This wheel tells me how the Hebrew word has been translated every time it shows up in the ESV. So this shows up 250 times in the Old Testament. And 212 of those times, it's translated heart. Now, in your English encyclopedia, what does the word heart mean?
Like the seat of emotion.
Yeah, the emotional center. That's probably the number one way we think about it. But remember, encyclopedias is not a dictionary, so what else does heart mean for y'all?
It's an organ in your chest.
Okay, yeah, it's a muscle that's like pumping blood through my body. Okay, anything else?
Bravery?
Okay, yeah, take heart, for sure. Bravery. Think Valentine's Day. Love, romance, right? So it's the seat of all emotion, but specifically it's pretty closely tied to romantic emotion. We could probably go on, but I think those are the big ones, okay? Let's see if that matches with the Hebrew. Here are some examples of how it gets translated as heart. One thing that I like to do, if you've been with us for a while, you've seen me do this, is I highlight the word in question, and I like to just swap out the original Hebrew word there when I'm reading, and it helps me kind of build a list of meanings for that word when I do it that way. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is from 2 Samuel. It says, "And he swayed the levav of the men of Judah as one man, so that they sent word to the king, 'Return both you and all your servants.'" So somebody has persuaded people. I would use heart there, right? Is there another word I might use there? Okay, seems like it, yeah. If I'm going to say, if I'm persuading somebody, what's that?
Mind.
Yeah, I might say they changed their minds, right? Okay. Nathan said to the king, "Go do all that is in your levav, for the Lord is with you." All that's in my emotions, all that I'm thinking about doing, go do it. Okay? "Surely they will turn away your levav after other gods." I like heart there, right? Whom do you love? Is it Yahweh or is it Marduk, right? That one makes sense to me. Although mind could also make sense too, right? Which one are you thinking about? Which one are you praying to? Let's do a couple more. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his levav after other gods. Same as this 1 Kings one, right? Let me see if there's another one here. Oh, this is a good one. 2 Kings here. "Because your levav was penitent, and you humbled yourself before the Lord, when you heard how I spoke against this place and against the inhabitants, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I have also heard you, declares the Lord." So your levav, it can be persuaded, it can repent, it can be after one thing or after another. It can have plans going in it. If we look up here at our wheel, there's some other translations, although they're clearly the minority by a long shot. And the next biggest one, it's only translated 10 times this way, but it is mind. "And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her levav." Everything she was thinking about. Interesting thing to note about this passage, Jesus quotes this in 3 out of the 4 Gospels. He says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." Is that what he says? No. What does he say?
He says mind at the end.
Yes. So in, I think it's Mark and Luke, he gives 4 things. He says, you'll love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And in Matthew, he drops strength. He just says heart, soul, and mind. I'm not sure what's going on in that one. But with the other 2, I think I do know what's going on. I don't think we've got time to look into it today. But if you go to the Greek and you look at cardia, their word for heart, it appears to match much more closely onto the English idea of heart. I think either Jesus or the gospel authors have decided to include the Greek word mind there to cover the semantic range of levav, which includes both the emotional center of the human, but also the intellectual center. All of your planning and thinking and that sort of thing is included in this one Hebrew word. And so to really get the idea across in Greek, Jesus goes heart and mind. Maybe. That's my guess, just from using this tool and looking at them. Yes?
You may be going there, but the next one down has both mind and heart, but the heart, I'm sorry, 1 Chronicles 22:19.
Oh, here. Now set your mind and heart to seek the Lord. Now,
Heart is not.
yes, you're correct. So if this were lavav, it would be highlighted. So that tells me right away there's a different word here that's being translated as heart. And I haven't looked, but I'm going to go out, I'm going to make a guess here, and I'm going to guess it's this word, nephesh. Let's see. This is 19. Now set your levav and your nephesh. There you go. So let's talk about that one. This is my favorite Hebrew word that I've discovered through using this tool. We'll look at it in here for a second, but first I just want to kind of explain to you the process that I went through with this word. So this is what's called, where did it go? There it is. There it is. Yeah. So this is what's called a synecdoche. Heart is also a synecdoche. It's a word that stands in for a larger concept. So if I told you I've got a new set of wheels in the parking lot, you know I'm referring to an entire vehicle and there's not just like 4 tires stacked on each other, right? So heart does that. Literally, a heart is an organ in your chest, but we use it to stand in for the entire emotional world of human experience, right? This is also a word like that. Literally, it's the word throat. So before we look at it, let's process that a little bit together. What do you think throat, if I'm going to use that to stand in for something bigger, what are we talking about? Talking? Yes. Very often, you'll see in the Hebrew Bible, they'll say something like the voice of his nephesh. Right? Breath. Yes. If you were here 2 or 3 weeks ago, we looked for a long time at the Hebrew concept ruach.
Also mean emotion. You know, your throat.
Yes. Yes, it could. It could mean emotion. Also, how do you convey emotion to another person? Often it's evident in your voice. Yeah. So if you missed the conversation about ruach, that's the Hebrew word that gets translated as spirit, but it also means wind, like the thing that moves the trees outside, and breath. So when someone breathes their last, it is both literally and figuratively in Hebrew, their spirit leaving their body, their ruach going out for the last time. When God parts the Red Sea, it is his ruach, his spirit and a wind, moving the water back. It's the same word. And where does that live? Where does your ruach go? Right here. It's in your nephesh, in your throat. Think about this part of the body. If I want to hurt somebody, this is maybe the single most vulnerable spot on the human body, right? What happens if you cut this part of the body? Huh? So there's a lot of blood, isn't there? If you know a lot about Hebrew culture and the emphasis they put on blood and how synonymous it is with life for them, this, as a synecdoche, right, as a metaphor for a larger concept, this is your life. It's where your spirit lives. It's where your lifeblood lives. It's where your voice comes from. Right? This is your life. So that's the journey I've been on. Let's actually look at it. So here it is. Nephesh, throat, neck, but then also by extension, breath, living being, right? Because the living being has to have a nephesh, right? People, personality, life, soul, or even a dead soul. Can be. Notice also, much wider spread of translations for this word. The majority of them, 230 of 730, is soul. But then we also get quite a few that are just life. And then all these little ones that are person, living, just like himself, right? Let's look at some examples. Prepare for me delicious food such as I love and bring it to me so that I may eat it, that my nephesh may bless you before I die. What story is this in?
Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau, very good, yep. So they bring to their father, he says to his sons, to Esau, bring me the food that I like before I die. I'm going to bless you with my nephesh. Literally, I'm going to say something to you, right? This part of my body is going to produce a sound at you. But more metaphorically, my life is going to give you something. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau. It's the same deal. Yep. Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servant of my lord are camping in an open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your nephesh lives, I will not do this thing. So this is in the story where David has slept with Uriah's wife and has tried to bring him back home to cover up the fact that he got Uriah's wife pregnant. But Uriah is too much of a stand-up guy to go home and relax at his house with his wife. He's thinking, all my fellow soldiers are out on the battlefield. How can I do this? And to emphasize the point, he says to the king, as you live and as your nephesh lives, I'm never going to do that. Now, this is a pretty common idiom in Hebrew. You're going to see this a lot if you start looking at the original Hebrew. But more broadly, often it's just like, as this thing is, and even more this. And they're usually like the same thing, right? We will, if you're threatening somebody, we will destroy you all, and we will leave no one behind. It's like, that's the same frame, but it's like, it's repetition for emphasis. So when he says, as you live and as your nephesh lives, he's just saying, as surely as you're alive, I'm not going to do this thing. There's one, I'm not sure if it's on here, but it says when David and Jonathan, when they become close friends, it says David's nephesh was knit to Jonathan's. And it's literally like it's the word for like sewn together, which is kind of a visceral image if you're thinking of throat. But like, there's no getting out of that. If your nephesh is knit to someone else's nephesh, you guys are in it, right? Now, naturally, also this leads to this translation. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my nephesh may be spared for your sake.
Save my neck.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, this is save my neck. Yeah. So this is Abraham talking to his wife and saying, lie to the Egyptians. Tell them that you're my sister. Lie-ish. I mean, she's my half-sister, right? Not a good look, Abraham. But literally he's saying, yeah, why do I want you to do this? To save my neck. I don't want them to kill me. We could go on. I think you're all getting the idea. What's very interesting to me is that in the English, we say with all your heart and with all your soul. Which of those two lives on when you die? In English. Your soul. If I'm thinking of levav and nefesh, which one is likely to go on after I'm gone, after I'm dead? It's not my nefesh. And this thing gets cut, I'm out, right? But my levav, where my emotions and my intellect and my innermost being, that's what's going to be reborn, right? I just think that's interesting that they've kind of been flipped in between the Hebrew and the English. You still get the idea, right? But there you go. All right. And the last one, might. This is the word me'od. Strength, power, very. I love this word. Notice about 50% of the time, it's an adjective meaning a lot. So in Genesis, when it says, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was me'od, good. It was mighty good, right? This is an emphasis word. So, love the Lord your God with all that is in you, your innermost being, your intellect and your emotions and who you really are. Love him with your very life and with all your elbow grease, right? With your very. Right? Now, some of you might be thinking, heart, soul, might, I already got it. Why are we doing this? Hopefully you're not thinking that, but maybe you are. And you're right. What I said at the very beginning of this class is, I don't think any of you have misunderstood the Bible. But for me, going on this process and this journey makes this so much richer and more beautiful. And I'm hopeful that it's doing that for you too. Especially since I've been hearing this since I was, my Kai's 3. I've been hearing this forever. And heart, soul, mind, strength. Yeah, I got it. Right? You start digging into these other words that have slightly different connotations, different semantic ranges, and it reawakens it for me. Helps me to see it in a new way and to think about it more seriously. Do I love God with all of my very? Not every day, right? Anyway, that's the point of what we're trying to do here. Let's go back to any questions about any of these words before we move on. Let me show you one really cool thing before we go back. Where is that? 1 Kings 3. So when Solomon asks God for wisdom, you want to know what he actually asks for? Where is it? Give your servant, therefore, a Shema Levav, an innermost being that listens. Understanding mind, that doesn't cut it for me. All right? This word Shema we looked at last week. It's the word that begins the Deuteronomy passage we're looking at. And it can be translated here, but we saw through examples and through digging in, it means more like to listen attentively. It even gets translated as obey. It's not just, yep, I heard you. It's, I'm gonna take this in and I'm gonna do something with it. And it's not stated outright, but who is Solomon shmawing? God. He asks for a listening heart, a mind that obeys. I think that's really cool. Okay, so we've looked at different translations. We've placed this in the overall story, and we've used our multiple translations and our scholarly resources to dig deeper into this passage. Now let's think about cleaning our encyclopedia for a little bit. Are there any cultural ideas associated with this passage that we either need to try to get out of our head for a second or into our head for a second? Last week, several of y'all wanted to go to here and say, like, I wonder what their gates were, what their doorposts were, and things like that. Those are great questions. I want to dig into that now. Jay, you had your hand.
So, when you brought up heart today,
Yes.
I noticed that the first entry was in Samuel, which means that would have been written down in Babylonian exile or thereafter. And so, if that is the first entry for heart, it had a different, perhaps, connotation or hearing prior to the exile. Which, if this is the word that they re-recorded in the exile, how much more important is hearing the word of the Lord when you don't have the temple because it's been destroyed?
I don't believe, I might be wrong. Yeah, I don't believe these are in order.
Chronological. Okay.
Yeah, so here's Deuteronomy. I'm sure this word appears in Genesis. I don't have an example there, but
It was just the
Yeah.
first thing I noticed, like, oh,
Yeah.
it's interesting, like,
I'm not
you're
sure.
Israel, and you're hearing that from a place of exile,
Yeah.
instead of entry into the promised land.
Mhm.
That's a different connotation.
Yeah.
A drift between the two, as we're talking about.
There is a whole other level there we could go to, which is to say, to look at when things were written or rewritten or put into the collection of Scripture and how that may have changed or affected certain things. I don't know that I want to go there today because I'm not prepared to go into all of those details. Any other, just questions even? Things that you, yeah.
Something to consider is their understanding of soul.
Mm-hmm.
Soul was not detached from the body.
Right.
They were one and the same. So that's why the idea of resurrection is so important. That when they wrote soul, they're referring also to the human body.
Right.
Not to something ethereal, which is what a lot of people have a concept of when you hear soul.
Right. Yes, that's true. Okay. No, that's good.
I would say I don't, like you said, we haven't misunderstood.
Right.
I don't think anyone has misunderstood that this was really intended to encompass all parts
Right.
of yourself, your life.
Everything. Yes.
And teach it to your children.
Yes.
Diligently.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not sure what the translation was for diligently, but I feel certain in saying that it does stick to the same idea we have of
Yeah.
this is a duty you have to work on.
Well, and it gets unpacked, diligently gets unpacked in the next few phrases. Talk about them when you sit up and when you, or when you sit down and when you get up, when you go in, when you come out. Just like, it's examples, but it's like literally everything that you do, talk about them, don't stop talking about them. Yeah,
But it has to be like on your heart.
Right.
God sincerely.
which is why that shows up first. Yeah, yeah. Good. Okay. Have any of these words, even just from the ESV to your encyclopedia, have any of them shifted and maybe made this hard to grasp? I think exploring this word in particular, soul, has helped me tremendously, because when you say, you do this with your soul, Okay, like, do you mean like soulfully? Do you like? I don't have a good grasp on what it's an ethereal word. It's a churchy word. I don't really know what it means. I'll use it.
Are you thinking we should speak it more since you're just talking about it being the throat?
I'm saying when people use the word soul, this might not be true for you. I don't necessarily know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like what you're saying, it's this like my ghost. Okay, maybe I understand in that concept, like there's part of me that's going to live on after I die, sure. But what does it mean to love God with that? And you'll hear songs that'll be like, praise the Lord, oh my soul. Just say praise the Lord. What are we talking about, right?
Well, and if you read it, you say with all your heart, with all your life, and with all your mind.
Yeah.
Does that give you clearer meaning?
That's what I'm saying.
And that's what
Yeah.
you're trying to convey to everybody. Sometimes you may need to insert a word that means something clearer to you to convey what's actually meant here and not detach it. Something ethereal then followed by everyday stuff of when you sit up, when
Right.
you leave the house, when you...
How do I connect this to that? Yeah. If this means my neck, then yeah, I'm thinking, especially in a less secure time and place than 2024 US. All right? They're probably thinking about their neck a whole lot more than I am. So I hijacked that. But does anyone else have thoughts or questions about how words may have shifted or
I
anything?
mean, culturally, I'm always going to think soul, to be honest with you. But
Yeah,
if we're
that's
talking
fine.
about it with throat, if we're constantly talking about God, you can't help but to think about it. The people
Yep.
who are around you can't constantly, they're going to have to think about God if you're constantly speaking with that soul in that context.
Yes.
It could be interpreted too. Sorry, did I?
No, go ahead.
You know, your innermost being. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not, yeah, like your life,
Mm-hmm.
but that's tied to your innermost being. Like if you lose that, then who are you?
Yeah. For sure.
As a teacher from a Christian school, I think of the term biblical integration.
Okay.
That's the last part of the verse. It becomes an integral part of your whole life. And
Yeah.
you express that to your children. So you integrate that into their life. And it becomes who they are.
Yeah. What does it mean to be a Christian school? Does it mean we're allowed to pray? Or does it mean the Bible and Jesus infuses
In
everything that we do? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we looked at this at the end of last week, and I want to do it again. So say you've gone through a passage and you've used these tools. At the end of that process, this is what I like to do. I like to ask myself, okay, do I understand this? And a bar for that, a metric for that is, can I teach it? Now, obviously, I'm a professional teacher, so this may not work for everybody. I don't know what will make sense in your head. But I do think this is important, especially if you're thinking about being a parent or even just working with kids or teens in the church or new Christians, right? You're probably going to have to teach a less mature Christian at some point, whether that's literally a less mature human or somebody older than you who's brand new to the faith, right? Okay? If I can imagine teaching a non-Christian or a younger person or someone who doesn't speak English very well what I just read, that's a good indicator that I get it, or at least I get part of it. I don't know that we ever get all of what we read in the Bible, but you get it enough that you could communicate it to somebody else. What if you get to the end of this process and you go, I can't do that. There's no way I can make this make sense. In that case, these are the next steps that I offered, and I went through these last week. I want to go through them again. If I don't think that I could teach this, I don't think I understand it, read it again. Unlike modern literature, the Bible is not intended to be understood at one go. I know a lot of people who think, I've read the Bible. I don't need to read it again. And if you're talking about something that was written last year, I'd agree with you. I'd be like, yeah, you've read it, you're good. But not only is this a very dense and culturally different book that might take some multiple readings just to get that sort of first pass understanding, it was actually designed to be read multiple times. And I gave the example last week of the book of Jonah and how the last chapter of the book of Jonah recontextualizes the whole book and makes you go, I got to start over at chapter 1. Jonah's a really clean example of that, but that's happening all over the Bible. And often it's happening in one place that affects a different place. You'll read something in one part of the Bible and you go, oh, this actually informs some other part that I was reading. If you were here with us way back toward the beginning of this class, we tracked with this the idea of eyes and seeing in the Bible. And we got to this phrase in 1 Samuel 18, Saul eyed David. And with all of the context of Genesis and Judges in mind, maybe we would have gotten that this was a bad thing on a first reading. But with all those in mind, you're going, don't do that, Saul. Right? This is not going to end well. Last time I saw that happen, Eve ate the fruit. Last time I saw that happen, Samson went after that girl and thousands of people died. Right? So if you're not getting something, read somewhere else. And eventually, I think that the Bible will inform itself and show you this is kind of what you're missing. Thirdly, talk to somebody else. Chances are somebody gets it better than you do. Somebody more mature, someone who's read more, someone who's prayed about it more than you have, that sort of thing. And don't be afraid to ask difficult questions. I said last week, if you're looking at a passage and you go, I actually don't think I agree with that. I think if you read the Bible honestly, you're going to hit those moments. I think you should lean on, that's a problem with me, and not a problem with the Bible. I think if you start from there, then you can go and talk to somebody and be like, okay, what am I missing? Because this doesn't make sense to me. And I think those conversations actually help both parties involved. And finally, pray. Pray. Scripture is not the only way that God talks to his people. Pray about it. Maybe start there. Yeah, maybe put that at the top. Yeah.
Both ends.
Okay. Y'all got some homework. Next week, I'm out of town. I think we just won't have this class next week. But the week after, we'll be back. And I want you all to bring passages that you are interested in, confused about, things like this. And we will use the tools that we have practiced throughout this class, like we did with Deuteronomy, to see if we can elucidate that passage together. And if no one brings anything, I'll have some sort of fallback we can do instead. All right. Thank you all for coming. Have a great week.